2, Law 2. The subjective mind is constantly open to control by suggestion, and it's most easily reached in a state of hypnosis. It's most easily reached and manipulated, which is what the theatrical hypnotists of the 1890s were doing. And number 3 is where he brings everything together. The subjective mind is incapable of inductive reasoning. In other words, you will never know what goes on in your subconscious mind because it is not a logical pattern developed in there. It's simply a camera. It remembers everything. But the second half of that sentence is where Thomson Jay Hudson strikes out on his own. It is a distinct entity possessing independent powers and functions. Now I want you to think about that. Independent powers and functions. And that's where the paranormal comes in. His theory is that your subconscious mind is able to manipulate objects, do things that you are not even aware of. It has a mental organization of its own. It can sustain an existence independent of the body or the conscious mind, and it can manifest itself through telepathy, producing apparitions and visions and moving physical objects. In other words, poltergeists. He says it's all coming from your mind. With these 3 laws, Thomson and his followers felt that they could explain every form of spirit communication. And in fact, the popularity of his book destroyed the religion of spiritualism. There was a marked decline in the people who declared themselves spiritualists after that book was published. And it lasted for almost 2 decades, until World War I. Now, if any of you have seen, within the past year, the movie War Horse, and saw scenes of the utter horror and devastation in Europe, and how 500,000 English boys died in the mud of France and Germany, spiritualism revived about that time, because so many grieving families had had their children ripped away from them, and they didn't want to think that they could never communicate with them again. So spiritualism saw a revival, especially in Europe, in the 1920s. Now, Hudson's idea, basically, as I said, is that any contact with spirits is in fact contact with the medium or the subject or your own subconscious, that record of every second of our lives. Telepathy, he proves by citing case after case after case, he proves that that is 2 subconscious minds reaching out and exchanging information with each other. Now, his belief that 2 subconscious minds under the right hypnotic conditions can communicate with each other, influence each other, even heal each other, all without the conscious mind of the people being aware. That, he says, is the essence, the truth of mind reading. Mind reading is real, but the conscious mind of the people involved will never know that it is the subconsciouses that are communicating with each other. He cites case after case, as I said, who have proven beyond a doubt, in his words, that telepathy does exist. Now, this I found really interesting. He claims in his book to have himself telepathically cured over 1,000 people through what he called psychotherapeutics of various ailments without their knowledge But after he had told reliable witnesses on the slide that he was going to attempt to heal these people, and he asked for reports later to see if there had been any change in these people. He claimed in this book that he had claimed people of, among other things, paralysis, bowel ailments, and crossed eyes. He even said he cured a friend who had a short leg, even though the friend was 1,000 miles away. He fills an entire chapter with these reports. And then he goes on to say that it's not really important to his reduction of psychic phenomena to the laws of nature, and that he would explain them in a later book, which he does. He spends 125 pages of this book explaining how such paranormal experiences as spirit rapping, poltergeists, floating apparitions, and ghosts are projections from someone who has been able to suppress his conscious mind and let his subconscious mind take over. These people able to do this can use their conscious minds to implant ideas in the subconscious. Hudson calls it autosuggestion. And then enter into a deep hypnotic state in which the subconscious mind can cause things to happen. He even says that this is how the so-called witches of the Puritan era could produce visions of familiars, cats, and bats, and things like that, which I found very interesting, since one of my long-ago grandmothers was hung as a witch in Connecticut. We just found that out this summer. He also explains that this ability of the subconscious mind to move things explains a phenomenon some of you might be familiar with called astral projection, where you feel like you're having an out-of-body experience. And I myself, this is one of the few things that I will testify to. I've had this. Almost 50% of Americans have had this experience. That's what Thomson Jay Hudson says. These laws explain that. All of it can be explained by his 3 laws of phenomena. Subconscious mind, not spirits from the dead, not voices from beyond. Despite what the spiritualists wanted to believe, Thomson Jay Hudson scientifically proves in that book that it's your own subconscious mind that's producing these voices and effects. Now, there were enough believers around the world to make that book an international bestseller, and it still has its followers today. I was amazed to find. We in Windham have never heard of Thomson Jay Hudson, but there's people around the world who have. In fact, many of the ideas that he had about psychotherapeutics, distance healing, are very, very close to what the Christian scientists believe today. And that is a major religion, and their beliefs are not far from what Thomson Jay Hudson said was possible. Now, Hudson spends the last chapters of this book demonstrating that the New Testament and the life of Jesus, with all the miracles of healing, the visions during the temptation in the wilderness, these, he says, are the ultimate proof of his theory. He says that much of the Bible talks about these very things. In fact, he says that Jesus was the perfect master of the laws of psychic phenomena, probably the only one who ever existed. Thomson Jay Hudson could not become a minister like his father wanted because he didn't believe in everything that the dogma taught. But Thomson Jay Hudson did remain a Christian his entire life. And he says that Jesus was the perfect master of the laws of psychic phenomena. Now, I'm not here tonight to defend Hudson's theories. I can't. But after the publication of his book in 1893, he left the patent office and he spent the rest of his life lecturing across the nation about psychic phenomena and the paranormal. I know that he had at least one child who lived in California. I've also seen one picture that claims to show him and his grandchildren, and the caption says, at his home in Ohio. But I've never been able to establish where he came. I doubt if he came back to Windham, probably to the shores of Lake Erie. But he apparently did live the rest of his life, when he wasn't on the road, in Ohio. He wrote 4 more books, of which I have 3. There is the Law of Mental Medicine, in which he discusses his theory of psychotherapeutics, distance healing through the subconscious mind. And 2 that have a very strong Christian flavor, a scientific demonstration of the future life, in which he attempts to portray exactly what is going to happen in the future and the evolution of the soul. And to Thomson Jay Hudson, the subconscious mind and the soul were virtually identical. Now, I don't want to lead you on. I haven't read any of these books. I don't have enough time left in my life. He's a very difficult writer to get to. But I haven't met anybody else who's from Windham who's read books by our most famous son. Maybe you have it tonight. By the way, I should mention right now that the book that I've been talking about, The Law of Psychic Phenomena, is available online. You can read it online. Just Google the title, The Law of Psychic Phenomena, and there's the text of it is available free of charge. Or you can get it from Amazon for $9.95. Thomson Jay Hudson died from a heart attack on May 26, 1903. He's buried underneath a stone that describes him as the author of The Law of Psychic Phenomena, followed by a line from a poem by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. How can he be dead who lives immortal in the hearts of men? He didn't have his followers. 8 years after Thomson Jay Hudson died, in Rochester, New York, he wrote a letter to an English psychic named Usborne Moore. He used a medium named Mrs. Georgia to dictate the letter. Moore published this letter 8 years after Hudson died. He published the letter in a book entitled Glimpses of the Next State. Now, I've read that book. And that may be the most astonishing thing that I've ever read. Hudson said, through this medium, that what he wrote in his books when he was alive about the spirits of the dead not being able to communicate with the living was obviously wrong. To be exact, and this is a quote, what he told this English researcher was, I wrote a great many things in my books, the same as all writers do. Some of it I believed, some of it was just filler. I was on earth then. Great heavens, can't a man change his mind after he's dead? So, what should we believe about this man who got his education in the Windham School? What he wrote in his books? Or what he wrote in this post-mortem postscript? Thank you.